Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us read from the verse 45. स्वे स्वे कर्मण्यभिरतः स्वे स्वे कर्मण्यभिरतः संसिद्धिं लभते नरः संसिद्धिं लभते नरः स्वकर्मनिरतः सिद्धिं यथा विन्दति तच्छृणु यथा विन्दति तच्छृणु यतः प्रवृत्तिर्भूतानां यतः प्रवृत्तिर्भूतानां येन सर्वमिदं ततं स्वकर्मणा तमभ्यर्च्य सिद्धिं विन्दति मानवः स्वे स्वे कर्मणि अभिरतः. One who is devoted to one's own duty, samsiddhim labhate naraha. This naraha, this human being, attains success being devoted to one's duty. Swakarma nirata siddhim yatha vindati tachshunu. But Arjuna, listen, how one devoted to one's duty attains success, how that is so, please listen. And so this whole structure, organization based on the duty is meant for some siddhi or a complete success in one's life, as success is defined by the Bhagavad Gītā. Success is defined, the first stage of success is jnana nishtha yogyata, the fitness to attain jnana nishtha or abidance in knowledge, a fitness to gain the knowledge or fitness to gain ultimately abidance in knowledge. This fitness, this yogyata, this preparation is the first stage of success. And ultimately, gaining the knowledge and abidance in knowledge is the ultimate level of success. This is a success that Bhagavad Gītā talks about. And that's the real success. So siddhi means success. Some siddhi, complete success. In as much as success is a subjective phenomenon, not an objective phenomenon, all the questions that are asked about this Varnashrama Vyavastha, Swamiji, what if one is born this way and then what, can he rise or not? Can he change or not? Can he become Brahmana or not? Can he do the duty of the Brahmana or not? These questions are always asked. It looks as though a person is condemned by his birth, because he's just equal to the same kind of work, but can he change? Can he do something? All of these questions arise only because of what do we look upon as the purpose. As I said, the purpose here is an inner purification, an inner success, and if that purpose is understood, then these questions won't arise also that I should become something else. If what I am doing is a means of gaining that inner success, then the question of my doing something else does not arise. And so, if there is clarity about one's purpose of life, or the process of life, that my life become a process of an internal purification, which is what is the capacity to gain the happiness, that not only do I require the means of happiness, but I require the capacity to enjoy them, and that if I have the capacity to enjoy them, I don't even require the means to enjoyment, because the very capacity itself is enjoyment. If this is clear, then one attains that success, because that is a real success. Even though success is associated with wealth and prosperity and name and fame and power and rank and recognition, so these are the conventional criteria of success. But ultimately, as in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says, Atmastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati, whatever is dear to me for my own sake, which means that ultimately the wealth and name and fame, all of these can become meaningful only when they make me feel good about myself. And so what I am seeking through all of these ultimately is to feel good about myself, to become accepting of myself, to be comfortable with myself. That would be called a failure when I am not comfortable with myself, and therefore there is a constant conflict with my own self. And there is self-non-acceptance, self-discomfort. And when there is a discomfort within myself or non-acceptance of myself, it doesn't matter what I have. And if there is a comfort with myself, it does not matter again what I have. And therefore what I have never matters other than fulfilling my basic needs. Yes, that matters. That I am hungry, that I need food, and that I need clothing to protect my body, that I need a shelter from heat and cold and rain, and that I require the resources to fulfill my duty towards my family, whatever duty that is required to my children and to my family, I have to provide for them. Yes, these definitely are the needs. But beyond that, it doesn't matter what more I have, because happiness always comes from within myself, never from without myself. And that being the case, my pursuit, apart from gaining my basic needs, yes, and for that of course effort must be made, ultimately the effort must be to bring to manifestation that happiness or fullness which is my own nature. And therefore, should life become a process of acquiring what I don't have so that I feel I have a lot of possessions and greater outer importance and that makes me feel good about myself, or should my life become a process of removing, as I said, the obstacles of raga, dvesha, attachment, aversion, which deprive me of the happiness which I am. So happiness I already am, but there is something that deprives me of that, and that is not something outside of myself, my own likes and dislikes. So my own attachment, aversion deprive me of the happiness I am, and should it not be then that my life should become a process of getting rid of these obstacles? In fact, very often it happens that the very process of acquiring the external things increases obstacles, because they bring the raga dveshas with them. They bring their own cravings, they in fact increase my greed, and they increase the possibility of my anger, and the jealousies and pride, and so all the outer possessions have the problems of in fact bringing more and more impurities. They don't have to, but that's what generally happens. We don't find that the person becoming wealthier and person becoming more important, becoming humbler. Very rare that you find a person becomes more humble, that he becomes less demanding. Usually find person becomes more arrogant, person becomes more assertive, person becomes more demanding. Is it not so? There may be exceptions, no doubt. But then they have become what they are, not because they wanted to become, they have just become. As we said, if you are a good person, things can come to you anyway. It is not that there is anything wrong with wealth or power, then let it come on its own, that it's a very graceful way of getting it. But if I demand it, then I always remain a demanding person, always an assertive person. Anyway, the point is that samsiddhi, or that success that Lord Krishna defines, is an inner phenomenon. And understand that success is always an inner phenomenon, never an external phenomenon. That an external achievement, in fact, as we said, creates an internal event of making me feel good about myself. It just makes me feel comfortable with myself, and that is a real success. So when the so-called success comes, this is what happens inside. And therefore, that is what is called success. And how do you gain success? By performing the duty. And that too, if in performance of the duty, the spirit of worship is added. Yatah pravrittir bhutanam yena sarvamidam tatam swakarmana tam abhyarcha siddhim innati manavah. Let every action become an archana. Archana is that you offer flowers at the feet of the Lord. We utter one name and offer a flower. Om Achyutaya Namaha, one flower. Om Anantaya Namaha, one flower. Om Govindaya Namaha, one flower. Om Keshavaya, whatever. Utter one name and offer a flower. This process is called Archana. So here Lord Krishna says that instead of flower you can offer your action also. Every action can become a flower. Om Keshavaya Namaha, an action is offered. Om Narayanaya Namaha, an action is offered. Om Madhavaya Namaha, an action is offered. So every action itself can become a flower. And therefore, the archana, it is a wonderful thing to do, to offer flowers uttering the name of the Lord. That is archana. It's a nice thing to do. But that archana or the worship need not be confined merely by offering material to the Lord, that it can become, in fact, a part of my life when every action that I perform is an offering. So Swami, what is meant by offering it to the Lord? What is meant by that? Just even say this, may the Lord be happy with this action. How do I know whether the Lord will be happy with my action or not? Well, as I said, do what the Lord does. So he demonstrates. He says, Yadadityagadam tejaha jagadbhasayate kshiram. Here Arjuna understand that the light which is there in the sun and the moon and the fire, that is my light, which means that I constantly illumine this world. Gama vishwaja bhutani dharayami ahamojasa. I sustain the whole universe by my strength. That means that I am the one who sustains everything. Everything is in its proper place because of me. And I am the one who becomes the moon and thus become the sap in the vegetables. I am the plant and vegetable kingdoms. I therefore become the food of all the living beings. I am the one who is the digestive fire in the stomach of all the living beings. I sit there and digest all the food. He silently keeps on doing this. God is silently and constantly, ceaselessly serving without even announcing anything. He is so silent that we don't even know His presence. Unfortunately, that's the reason why I can say that I don't believe in God. But also I can say because of His grace only. Of course, because yad vāsānam bhitam yena vāgabhidhyate, as Upanishad says, that which cannot be revealed by the speech, or that which cannot be uttered by the speech, but that because which the speech is uttered. And so, if you see what God is doing, He is silently serving. As sun, as moon, as all the elements, as earth, as fire, as all the elements and as anything in the universe, He is constantly offering Himself. So if nothing else, this very spirit of yajna, that's why Lord Krishna said in the 3rd chapter, Niyatam kuru karmatvam yajnasat karmaonyatra lokoyam karmabandhanaha tadartham karma kaunteya. Hey Kaunteya, hey Arjuna, may you perform your action in the spirit of yajna. Just take your lessons from the nature and see how every element of nature is performing yajna. That is the Lord performing the yajna. See, the sun is sitting right there, shining, and all the time, not only illumining the world, but constantly, as you said, by His heat, evaporating the water, converting into clouds, and bringing the rain where it is needed. So sun constantly draws water from faraway regions and brings it where it is needed to us. And similarly earth, and thus we see the role performed by every element. And we find how silently all of them are so designed as to serve the purpose. In fact, serve the purpose of human being, you can say. The whole world is serving the human being. And so, return the favorer, a sense of gratitude, a humility that arises from a sense of gratitude, an awareness of the fact that, look, I am a recipient of so much of favor and so many privileges I am enjoying, and therefore, just returning the favor by way of, in the spirit of this gratitude, even performing an action in the spirit of gratitude. That I am an engineer, I am a doctor, I am a lawyer, I am an accountant, I am a farmer, I am a cook, I am whatever I am. And it's my privilege to be so. If this is a spirit of duty, then I look upon my position and whatever I do is a privilege. Swami, but you are just a cook. What's the big deal about it? Doesn't matter, it's a privilege. Everybody is unique and everybody has a unique contribution to make. The sun can illumine, of course, the whole universe, the moon cannot do that much, doesn't matter. The stars can do much little, all that's okay. But then sun illumines in his own right, the moon illumines in his own right, the star illumines in its own right, a little lamp illumines in its own right. What is important is that illumination. And thus a little lamp also gets burned in the very process of illumination, but it does its job. And therefore, Swami would say that if you walk on the back road, you can see those wild flowers, just smiling away. It doesn't matter whether anybody looks at them, but they are just happy that they are there. And if somebody happens to look at them, well, that's an added privilege. And so, thus that I am, and what I am, and where I am, is a privilege, is a blessing, is a grace. To recognize that my life is a blessing, that it's a grace I am enjoying, and therefore, in that spirit of being blessed, in the spirit of being graced, in the spirit of gratitude, whatever action you perform becomes a worship. And thus, swakarmana tamabhyarcha, performing an action in the spirit of offering to the Lord. How do we know the Lord is pleased? When I also function in the same spirit in which He is functioning. And thus, a very spirit of offering, which arises on account of a sense of gratitude that I discover when I am aware of all the privileges I am enjoying. But Swamiji, I am not enjoying privileges. Look at that fellow. Look at what he has, and I don't have it. Look at what that fellow had. And so, unfortunately, this poor human being keeps on comparing himself with others, and is so keenly aware of his sense of incompleteness, and so keenly aware of what he doesn't have, that it is very difficult to feel a sense of gratitude. Always feel a sense of deprivation, sense of injustice, what I did. I'm always aware of what I don't have rather than what I have. So what I don't have becomes very, depending on what it is that the purpose of my life is. If I understand the purpose of life as yoga as a process, rather than bhoga, that's the process understood, that doesn't matter what I am and where I am, it's quite okay. As I said, yes, it is my duty to cultivate my abilities and do the best that I can. There's no question about it. I don't become complacent, I don't become inactive, and I say, doesn't matter, Swami, you said that I should be happy with what I am and therefore I do my little share. It's not that. Do what best you can do. But you can do the best. Well, you can't do better than that anyway, regardless of what you do. You cannot become an Einstein regardless of what you do. What shall we do? I cannot become a heavyweight, world heavyweight champion. I cannot. So what shall I do with me? I cannot become a football player. I cannot become an Olympic swimming champion or whatever. What shall I do? If I cannot become, shall I condemn what I am? And shall I reject myself? Or shall I say that, okay, this is what I am, and therefore being humble about one's own limitations as well as one's own abilities, being graceful and feeling blessed for what abilities I have, and being humble about what limitations I have. And therefore, thus accepting oneself and respecting oneself for what one is itself is a great devotion, service, to Lord. So that otherwise I keep complaining to Him and always bothering Him that you have not given me this and you have not given me that, and at least stop bothering Him. So that is one less worry that God has, that He need not worry about me. Give Him the freedom. Anyway, that is what is meant by giving Lord the freedom. You give whatever karma phala you want to give. This is my action I perform, now it's up to you what you want to do with it. You want to do me a favor by giving me a reward? Thank you. You think it's not necessary? Thank you. You think I don't deserve it? Thank you. You think you don't want to give me? Thank you. Give Him the freedom. That is a great devotion. Not to stress out somebody else is a great devotion, that's all. As we tell that story, of these two saints, this Tulsidas and Surdas, sitting on the same dais, and satsang is going on, and there was a rumor that a mad elephant is coming, run away, and everybody ran away. And Surdas, who is a blind saint, he all quietly got up from his stage and hid someplace. Whereas Tulsidas, he continued to stand there on the dais. In 10 minutes it was discovered that this was just a rumor, in fact there is no elephant, everybody came and took their place. And then Surdas also quietly came and took his place. And so Tulsidas, he asked him with a certain amount of pride, said, this is all the trust that you have in God? Did you not think that God will protect you? See, I continue to sit here, having trust in God that will protect me. Then very quietly Surdas, he says, well, if I can help myself, I need not give trouble to God, And so, not giving him trouble is also a favor, Give him the freedom. Let him decide what he wants to do with my action. Give him the freedom. It's all part of devotion means giving freedom also. Not nagging somebody all the time, that's not love. Give them the freedom. A non-demanding relationship is a great, that is love. So non-demanding relationship with God. In love there is always giving and not demanding ideally. Of course, he being what we are, there is always a silent demanding side, but then to the extent that we can make our relationship with God as one non-demanding and offering, that is called devotion. And therefore, being devoted to one's action, being devoted to the Lord, performing every action in the Spirit doesn't matter. God will know where He is and then He will receive the action. So it is not that we offer it to some individual entity. Well, if you can see God everywhere, that's most wonderful. If I do not see God everywhere, it doesn't matter. At least I can perform my action in the spirit of devotion, in the spirit of offering. Whatever I do. And as you said, we give freedom to God to decide what He wants to do with my action and what He wants to do. For the very simple reason that the reward always comes. What reward do you want from your action? Depends on what it is that you want. Is your action a means of yoga or bhoga? If you want some material benefit out of your action, then these questions will arise. Whether I am successful or not. But if what I want through my action, namely the inner purification, then success is guaranteed. If through performance of action, I want that I must gain inner purification, then there is guaranteed success because it is the spirit of offering and humility that brings about the inner purification. As you said earlier, action just becomes an occasion for me to maintain that spirit of devotion or offering. It is that very attitude that is purifying attitude. Action is just an occasion. Action, is something that is done with hands and legs in the speech, but then what goes with the action, namely what is there in the mind, it is that attitude which is a very purifying attitude. And therefore, Nihadvikamnasosti Pratyavayana Vidyate, Lord Krishna said in the second chapter that you can never lose out. There is always success, if success is defined in terms of an inner tranquility, an inner quietude, an inner freedom from conflict, then that success is guaranteed. Then when it comes to some outer gain, give freedom to God, whatever He wants to give. Swakarmana tabhyarcha siddhim vindati manavaha. Thus, worshipping the Lord with one's own karma, one's own duty, manava, the human being, attains siddhi, perfection. But then, and so, what it means is that whatever one's duty is, offering it to the Lord is a means of attainment of moksha. The means of attaining the ultimate goal is offering one's action performed in the sense of duty, offering it to the Lord. Nothing more than that. If you cannot see God anywhere, doesn't matter, you see God in the altar, that also, remember Him. Om Dagnod Bhagavad Dakshinamurte, Dakshinamurte Namaha, Shri Krishnaya Namaha, whatever is your deity, remember Him and offer Him. And so, that's what Lord Krishna says, Yat Karoshi, Yadashnasi, Yat Juhoshi, Dadasi. Whatever it is that you are devoted, let us hope that we are devoted to somebody in this earth, Somewhere the devotion must be there. If it is a teacher, if it is in some deity, if it is in a person, if it is in the father, if it is in my boss, if it is in my country, somewhere the devotion is there, hopefully. Discover devotion somewhere, other than money, and other than power, and other than ego, somewhere else. Somewhere the devotion is there, that's it, offer to that person, offer to that altar where your devotion. You are devoted to your teacher, fine, let my teacher be happy with this, Remember him and offer it, perform your action. So remembering the one to whom you are devoted will bring about a spirit of devotion. The important thing is to invoke the devotee from within oneself, that is most important. And the devotee is invoked when I remember the one to whom I am devoted. It doesn't matter who you are devoted to. As long as you are devoted to someone other than your own ahankara, your own ego, somewhere devotion is there. Somebody is devoted to country, somebody is devoted to just I don't know, somebody is devoted to his employer, somebody is devoted to some kind of a cause, to the family, to somebody, or to my Ishtadevata, the chosen deity. Wherever my devotion is, that is the God at this time, and therefore remember that. Invoke the devotee from within oneself and perform the action as a devotee. Important thing is, who performs the action? The devotee performs action. Thus, invoking the devotee from within myself is really the process of purification. What purifies the mind is the spirit of devotion. And the spirit of devotion comes when there is a devotee invoked from within myself. And the devotee is invoked when I remember the one to whom I am devoted to. So it is Sri Krishna, whatever it is, a given form, a given concept, anything that you are devoted to, anything that can invoke in you, a devotee. Swamiji, I believe in Hindu Dharma, doesn't mind, Hindu Dharma, whatever it is. And so whatever it is, Indian culture, something I am devoted to, Gurukulam I am devoted to, whatever it is. Whatever it is that you are devoted to, and hope that you are devoted to something. You should be devoted to something. Other than just our me and mine, something more than that our devotion should be. In that case, it's a matter of nothing but expanding ourselves, that's what it is. What it is that I'm identified with. If I'm identified with God, well, that's most wonderful. Then of course I'm identified with the whole universe. That's too huge. But that's the ultimate goal. When it is said that, as Ramana Maharshi says, Jagat Ishadhi Yukta Sevanam Ashtamurti Bhruddeva Pujanam. It is the whole universal manifestation of Lord in His eightfold form. And so serving the Jagat, serving the world, with the spirit that I am serving the Lord is the devotion. Is serving the Lord. Serving the world is serving the Lord. But that's too big to begin with. Ultimately that is what is expected. That what it is that I am identified with. There should be something I am identified with in my life. Something. Something other than simply myself I should be identified with. And the process of identification should enlarge. That I find myself identified with, when which I identify it with means that I feel happy to do something about that with which I am identified. I am happy in the happiness of the one with whom I identify. That's called identification. And that of identification enlarges, and ultimately becomes universal. That is the ideal worship of God. Swakarmana tamabhyasya. But it's a process. It doesn't happen in one day. It's a process of, as we said, an inner expansion, stretching myself out. Siddhim vinyati manavaha, then one knows God, and then next step is to know God as myself. When I know everything is God, that's the first step, and the ultimate step is to know that everything is myself. But karma yoga is a process of worship, and that worship enables me to ultimately see God everywhere. And by knowledge then, by Vedanta then tells me that God that you see everywhere is your own self. So it's a two-step process. By act of worship, I discover God everywhere, and then by knowledge, I can see that God as my own self. That will be the second step. So Swamiji, which is action with which God is happy? Which action should I perform so that God will be pleased? So says Lord Krishna in the verse 47, Shreyan swadharmo vigunaha, Shreyan swadharmo vigunaha, Paradharmat swanushtitad, Svabhavaniyatam karma, Kurvannapnoti kilbisham. Shriyan swadharmo vigunaha, paradharmat swanushtitad. Swadharmaha, one's own duty, Shriyan, is superior, is better. Vigunaha api. That and a word api should be added there in our own mind, not in the verse. But We must understand that even though one's own duty, even if it is devoid of merit, even though it may be defective, it may not be great, it may not be very great, in terms of its visibility or in terms of its, in terms of its capability of producing material benefit. That is, if my duty, even if it is defective, is better than Syanushthitat Paradharmat Shreyat, it is better than the duty of another well done. So here this question of competition comes, that a Vaishya may feel that maybe he should better be a Kshatriya, because he Kshatriya is a ruler class, I want to be a ruler. And therefore, so this question of superior and inferior comes whenever an action is judged by the material result that it produces. If action is judged by the inner wealth or the spiritual growth that it produces, then any action is as good as any other action. Because it is not the action, but the spirit with the action is performed is what brings about the spiritual growth, and therefore every action can be performed with the spirit of devotion. In that sense, therefore, as far as the result in terms of inner growth or inner purification is concerned, any action is as good as any other action. It can be cleaning toilets, it can be sweeping the floors, it can be cooking, or it can be ruling a kingdom, whatever it is. Any action is as good as any other action if the action is judged in terms of the reward, in terms of inner growth. That's what Lord Krishna is telling us. Don't judge your action as superior or inferior with reference. Don't judge your duty as superior or inferior with reference to the duty of anybody else, because duty is duty. No, but look what is, Swamiji, I like to do that, I like to do business. I want to do it, I want to become a millionaire. I want to rise up in my ladder, of power. If that becomes the goal, then of course an action is superior, another action is inferior. There is no doubt about that. Certainly, certain actions can make you a millionaire. Join the startup companies, that's the way to do, If you want to become a millionaire, do that. Because IPO or whatever it goes, that's the way to do. Or if you're smart enough, do the stock market, then one action is superior to another action. Swamiji, I have become a doctor, I am just dragging so much work I do. I wish that I had become something else, these days you don't know the HMOs and what they are doing and so forth. People complain. If Swamiji, if I evaluate the amount of income I make per hour, I make less than the minimum wage. About 24 hours a day and whatever it is anyway. And so, depends on how I judge my action. Yes, in terms of producing income, in terms of giving you visibility, in terms of your ego gratification, definitely actions cannot be said to be equal. A certain action will be superior to an action. Well, this is also being told to Arjuna, who wants to drop out from this battle, and he wants to be renunciate. Shreyo bhoktam bhaikshamapiha loke. Gurun hatva hi mahanubhavan shreyo bhoktam bhaikshamapiha loke. He said right in the beginning of the second chapter that rather than killing these great revered people like Bhishma, Drona, I think it's better that I must beg the food of bhiksha. So he proposed this renunciation because the Kshatriya cannot go out and beg food. It's not permitted. The only one who can beg food is a sannyasi. So if Arjuna becomes a sannyasi, renunciate, then he can do that. And that sounds very comfortable. Being in the battlefield and the prospect of having to fight the battle with one's near and dear ones, and therefore the emotional pain that it would involve, naturally the idea of giving up this very painful action and taking to an easy life of a renunciation is very comfortable. In reference to that, Lord Krishna says, Shreyan Swadharmo Vigunaha. Arjuna, even if you think that your own duty is not as as comfortable or as easy or as profitable, let's say, as the duty of someone else. Because what else can be the defect in the karma? It's not as profitable. It is because of my likes and dislikes. When the raga dveshas come, when my likes and dislikes come, then alone one action is just superior to other one. But swadharma, one's own duty, is better. But Swamiji, what is the duty? Those days it's alright, you were branded or you were called Brahmana, Kshatriya. What am I right now? What should I be called? And therefore we can interpret this word swadharma and paradharma in simpler terms. Swa means the self and dharma means the nature. And therefore performing an action which is in keeping with the nature of the self can be called swadharma. And paradharma, as we said, that I am a union of this person and personality or spirit and matter. So spirit or a consciousness can be called swa or my own self. Whereas this personality or matter can be called para or something different from myself. So thus there are two dharma. One is what we call the dharma or the action performed in keeping with the nature of the spirit. Other is an action performed in keeping with the nature of matter. And in my heart there is naturally a fascination for material gains and material pleasures, and therefore anytime I am ready to do something, both of these things want to draw my attention. The spirit also wants to draw my attention and the matter also wants to draw my attention. In which way? The matter draws my attention and tells me to Swami, it doesn't matter, tell little lie, compromise some value, but then, so there will be a greater material gain. So sometimes it happens that when we compromise our values, then it helps us in gaining a better material gain. So what is swadharma? Swadharma can be simply interpreted as performing an action in keeping with the basic values of life. Like non-violence, truthfulness, honesty, forgiveness. So these are the basic values of life. All these values are basically based on the self. Because self or Atma is non-violent, it doesn't violate anything or anybody. It is always truthful, and therefore understand that these values are basically derived from the nature of one's own self. That is the reason why whenever I perform an action in keeping with my values, then I feel good about myself, there is self-worth. And whenever I compromise a value, there is a conflict within myself, there is a sense of guilt, and I don't feel worthy of myself. So swadharma, what is swadharma? One's own duty, or duty in keeping with one's own nature, or an action performed in keeping with one's own nature, and that is the action performed in keeping with the basic values of life. And therefore non-violence, truthfulness, all these are all spiritual values. When we have spiritual values, values based on the nature of spirit. The opposite of it, the violence, is the material value because it is opposed to the spirit, and a person becomes violent whenever a person becomes controlled by his fascination for matter. When would a person compromise his honesty or truthfulness? When some material gain is there. Therefore, when material gain is there or the matter becomes a predominant factor, then the spiritual value is compromised. So swadharma, paradharma. An action in keeping with the nature of the self, an action in keeping with the nature of non-self. So Lord Krishna says, Shreyan swadharma vigunaha. In following your values, if you even stand to lose something, that is better than the gain that comes by compromising your values. That is how this verse can be simply translated or understood. Well, these days it is very difficult to determine what am I. Am I Kshatriya or am I Vaishya or what am I? Sometimes you don't know whether a Vanaprastha or a Grihastha or what it is also sometimes, And so we can understand swadharma as simply an action performed in keeping with the values. Paradharma, an action performed where the values are sacrificed. And the reason why a person would sacrifice a value is because there is something to gain. Nobody will tell a lie for the sake of lying. There is something to gain. And what is to gain? Some material benefit is there. So So Lord Krishna says, do not sacrifice your spiritual growth for the sake of material benefit. It's not worth it. In the third chapter this verse came. Shreyan swadharma vigunaha paradharma svanashyatat swadharme nidhanam shreyaha paradharmo bhayavaha. There Lord Krishna went on to say that it is better to die performing one's duty. That is, it is better to die following the values of life and performing one's duty. Paradharmo bhayavaha. Even though compromising the values may appear very attractive, bhayavaha, it brings in all, it is fraught with fear. Because it brings about conflict, it brings about sense of guilt. If nothing else, it just lowers myself in my own eyes. I never feel good about myself when I tell a lie. I never feel good. I hope that's how it's everybody, Swamiji, you don't know that. These people can, they can tell lie with feeling nothing at all. Cold-blooded murder, you can murder somebody and feel nothing. That can happen only when you made yourself so insensitive. You can make yourself so insensitive that nothing affects you, and that insensitive person cannot enjoy life anyway. Playing music before him, classical music, he'll fall asleep because he has lost his sensitivity. And therefore, Shreyan Swadharma. So therefore Lord Krishna says that Swadharma Nidhanam Shreyaha. If you think that you have to sacrifice yourself completely for following your dharma, the values, that is better. And these stories are being told. A story of Harishchandra is told, a story of Rama is being told, a story of Nachiketa is being told as to how they did not think that any kind of sacrifice was ever big enough to follow the truth or basic values of life. I don't expect that kind of sacrifice whatsoever at this time. But anyway, the thing is that all these kind of ideas are there. Svabhavaniyatam karma kurvanna apnodi kilvisham. Another question that can be there in case of Arjuna is, oh Lord, you are asking to perform this act of fighting the battle. But do you know it's going to involve what an amount of violence? Fighting battle means killing people, is it not so? And will I not be accountable for having perpetrated so much violence, and then I am a sinner? So Lord Krishna says, so all that, let's say we talked about the story, told the story of a butcher. How about a job of a butcher? He's chopping meat. Is it not violence? Is it not dirty work? Will it not bring blemish to me? Lord Krishna says, Svabhavaniyatam karma kurvan na apnodi kilvisham. If you perform the incompatible to your nature, and therefore which is a duty, then you do not incur any fault at all. Here Shankaracharya explains, just as a worm that is born in poison, a worm that lives in poison is not affected by poison. If we consume poison, of course it will affect us, but a worm that grows in poison is not affected by poison. And similarly also, if according to your nature, it is your duty to clean toilets, let us say, that is considered an impure task. And generally speaking, a person will take bath whenever he visits the toilet. That you have, and therefore, to somebody else, if he does it, it definitely would encourage you to call violence, but when you do that, it is not violence. Arjuna, if you fight this battle to protect the dharma, in the process of protecting dharma or the country, if it becomes necessary to use your weapons against the enemy, it is not called violence. If you use weapons in the street or in the palace, it will be violence. But in the battlefield, it is not violence. And therefore, a given action is not judged as violent or non-violent. It is the intention with which the action is performed that is what makes it violent or non-violent. If Arjuna also performs the action of fighting battle out of anger, out of enmity, to settle accounts, let us say, then it will be violent action. But he performs action purely in the spirit of protecting dharma, doing his duty, then it will not be judged violent. Svabhavaniyatam karma kurvan na apnodi kilvisham. One does not incur fault performing action according to one's own nature, performing one's duty. Elaborating that point, in the next verse Lord Krishna says, Sahajam karma kaunteya, Sahajam karma kaunteya, Sadoshamapi natyajed, Sarvarambhahi doshena, Dhumena agmirivavruta, Dhumena agmirivavruta. He kaunteya, Sahajam karma sadoshamapi natyajed. Hey Arjuna, that karma or action, the duty which is natural to you, which means that which is in keeping with your nature, even though it may be defective, one should not give it up. So what was said in the earlier verse is being said again. That if your duty involves you to do some dirty work, sometimes your duty may involve that you have to do some unpleasant things. Swami, you talk of non-violence, but suppose, I'm the boss and here is a person who is just not doing his work properly. What should I do with him? Is it all right to discipline somebody or not? Is it all right to fire somebody or not? That's a very unpleasant thing to do. It's hurting somebody. But in the position in which you are placed, if that is required for the overall good, you will have to do that. Like the action performed by a surgeon, where he may remove one portion of the body. Sometimes he may amputate my limb for saving the whole body. Now if you look at it from the standpoint of the limb, the thing is amputated and therefore it's a violent action. It is not called violence because the intention is to save the whole body. Similarly also, if you happen to be in a position where you have to take an unpleasant action, suppose you have to punish somebody. Punish means that you have to take some unpleasant action. Somebody is to be fired or whatever has to be done. Swamiji, would that be violence or not? Have I not hurt that person? You hurt the person, but not hurting the person, you'll be hurting something much more. If that surgeon does not remove some portion of my body, ultimately the whole body may rot. And therefore, very often in our life, on account of our responsibility, we have to perform some unpleasant actions also. Sometimes the mother may have to give some bitter medicine to the child also. And the child will cry, will resist, will run away, will hate also. I hate you, ma'am. Everything. And still, sometimes you have to be cruel in order to be kind. And therefore, as long as an action is performed in the spirit of devotion, as long as the action is performed not simply to, as I said, swakarmana tamabhyarcha, it is to promote God that I am doing it and not promoting myself. If behind the performance action I don't have a personal agenda of myself, well, whatever I do is done for the sake of a given cause. As I said, if you are employed somewhere, then you are working for a certain organization and that's your cause. And therefore the action that you perform, which is for the well-being of that organization, even unpleasant action also does not bring any faults. It is not considered a violence because it is your duty. And then the Lord Krishna is Sarvarambhaya doshena dhumen agnihi avrutaha. Understand that here Arjuna, there is no action that is totally free from faults. Every action involves a certain fault. Every action involves some violence. You cannot do some good thing also without hurting something. You can't even make chapati unless you take the dough, you have to, some violence is involved as far as the wheat is concerned, is it not? You take the wheat grains and you grind them, and then you make a dough out of it and you knead it, and you roll it, and what more? And then you bake it, Poor thing, what an amount of, pain it is to go through. And therefore, doing anything is going to require sacrifice in the previous state, otherwise you cannot do something. And therefore, this seems to be the very rule of this creation, that whenever something is done, some kind of a violence is involved. No creation can take place unless something is destroyed. Now, Swamiji, I can do something. See, I painted this on this piece of paper. There's nothing destroyed. Well, the plainness of the paper is destroyed anyway. Now there is something on the paper. So unless there is a change from the previous state, no new state can be created. Every creation involves the destruction of the previous state. Not that we should not be sensitive to that. Not that we should, but then it's going to involve some. And therefore, just as Lord Krishna gives an example, that some amount of smoke is always involved with fire. Some carbon dioxide is going to be there, some carbon monoxide. Yes, because when burning takes place, and then naturally these gases are produced. Sometimes you may not see them. It's possible, but there has to be a product of combustion. Dhumena agnihi avrutaha. Just as the fire is always covered by some smoke. And you know where does the smoke come from? Smoke comes from fire. Sahajam, janmana sahajatam. So that which is born naturally is called sahaja. And fire and smoke is something that is born naturally of fire. Therefore, the fire naturally gives rise to smoke, so smoke is called sahaja. So how fire is always accompanied or covered by smoke, and similarly also, whatever action you perform is going to be covered with some kind of some unpleasantness will be there, some violence will be there. Sometimes you may not know it, but it may still be there. As a simple thing, 4 persons are sitting and then you say, hey, this boy is so intelligent. The moment you say that, you praise one of them, that means other 3 are, this is Swamiji, what about us? The example that you give, so, hey, you cooked, today the sambar is so wonderful. Today sambar is wonderful. What about every day? Every day is not so, right? So when you say that today's preparation is wonderful, that means you already declared that the preparation of other day is not wonderful. So thank God that the listener is happy listening to this, but otherwise he can say, what do you mean, Swamiji? Oh, it's good only today. How about every day? You can't praise something unless you seem to condemn something. That is why they say that don't praise so much, don't keep praising, because someday you will condemn it. And don't condemn so much, because somebody will praise that thing. Anyway, the idea is that in every praise, some condemnation of somewhere is involved. In every favor that you do, some disfavor is involved, some partiality is involved, something is always involved. Unless I become a perfect person. Yes, we would think that an action performed by a perfect person who has no sense of ego at all, no sense of doership, well, I guess that person's action can be considered free from any fault. But as long as sense of doership is there, so long I always act from my individual standpoint, and therefore, in some way, I will violate the order. Some violation will be there. I can never be perfect. Even though I act to the best of my ability in keeping the order requires me to be an omniscient person, an omnipotent person to be able to really perform an action in keeping the order. Inasmuch as I am not omniscient, I am not all-knowing, and therefore, with the limited knowledge, whatever I do, the limited ability, whatever I do, and in whatever I do, some kind of sense of doership is there. However humble I am, still some little ego is going to be there. And that being the case, to that extent, the action is going to be somewhat defective. No action can be perfect. Every action involves some defect. And just because an action involves defect, therefore you cannot give up the action, because that's the only means that you have to grow. And in reference to the 3rd verse of this very chapter, Tyajyam doshavadityege karma prahur manishinah. There are some wise people, some learned people say that action must be given up altogether because action involves violence. Therefore, give it up. A spiritual seeker should give up action. Lord Krishna says, no, do the right actions. Even though it may involve a certain amount of defect, certain amount of blemish, some amount of violence, you should still do that because it also produces a great amount of merit. Sarvarambhaya doshana bhumin agnihi va avrutaha. Whatever actions you perform, like fire, is always covered with some measure of smoke, and so also whatever action you perform is going to involve some violence. You cannot please everybody by anything that you do. You try to please somebody, without your knowing, somebody gets displeased, That doesn't mean that you will not try to please somebody. In the fear that something may happen, in the fear that somebody may get displeased, therefore you don't do anything at all. That's also not right, because not doing something also is, you don't have the freedom. Lord Krishna said earlier also, Nahi kaschit kshanati jatu tishtari akarmakrit. In this chapter also Lord Krishna said, Nahi dehe vrutashakyam tyaktum karmani asheshatah. As long as you are identified with the body, so long you do not have the freedom to give up all the actions. Because that sense of limitation itself will always prompt you to perform action. As long as raga dveshas are there, they will not let you sit quietly. And therefore, number one, you do not have the freedom to give up all the actions. So if you do not perform deliberate action, you will perform the impulsive actions anyway. And therefore, here Arjuna, perform actions deliberately. And perform actions to the best of your ability. Perform actions keeping in mind the basic values of life. Perform your action as best as you can as a devotee in the spirit of devotion. And in so doing, if some defect remains, if some blemish remains, well, accept it. That no action or no vyavahara, no transaction can be 100%, can be perfect. It cannot be perfect. Regardless of what I do, it cannot be that I do everything that is in keeping with your expectation. It cannot be. Even if I fulfill expectation of one, I may not fulfill expectation of someone else. This is a fact. That being, accept this fact and do what you have to do. Be as sensitive as you can. Be as sensitive as you can so that the violence is minimized. But regardless of how sensitive you are, unknowingly also, some violence may take place. You will accept that reality of life and do what is the right thing to do. Therefore, sahajam karma kaunteya, talking about all these duties, Swamiji, but can a Shudra become a Vaishya or not? And can he rise up to become Kshatriya? As I said, these questions arise because the action is evaluated only from the standpoint of the material gain. Then alone a Vaishya would want to become a Shudra or something, or rather or a Kshatriya or a Brahmana. Because then you think that, hey, look, that fellow's action is more paying than my action, therefore I want to become that. So when action is evaluated from the standpoint of its material gain, then the raga dveshas will definitely come. Then my likes and dislikes will definitely come. If action is evaluated from the standpoint of the inner gain, then the likes and dislikes will not come. And this is Lord Krishna said this, you do that. Swamiji, is this practical to do that? Suppose everybody does it this way, what will happen to the society? Will it not stop the progress? Nothing will happen. Nobody is going to do this, unfortunately, Because all we are doing these days is only invoking and promoting the likes and dislikes. We are in fact person having stronger likes and dislikes is supposed to be, a stronger person, as a matter of fact, and therefore we are only glorifying the likes and dislikes. Therefore, glorifying the sense of competition, glorifying that killer instinct, you have to kill. Otherwise you can't win. So today we play to win. We play not to play, we play to win. The whole idea of play goes away when it plays only for winning. But that is how the culture is right now. And in that culture, this cannot work. You can do this, you can function with this. As I said, you can follow these values. And even while living in this culture, you can follow the values if you are willing to live with whatever you get. And also you are careful enough to protect yourself. Don't allow yourself to be hurt by others and don't allow yourself to be attacked by others. And therefore protecting yourself is, of course, is what is to be done. Draw your boundaries. Nobody can follow this advice right away in 100% way. Nobody can do that. And therefore, recognize what you can do. Draw your boundaries and function within those boundaries. Swami, I can tell the truth so much, so far. I can be honest, so long. I can be non-violent, so long. Okay. So draw your boundaries and within those boundaries you function. Don't allow yourself to be hurt by others. but hope to stretch out those boundaries as you go along. So this is a process, and siddhi, the perfection, comes in course of time. It keeps coming. Every action performed in the spirit brings you that measure of success. Svabhamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Lord Krishna said in the second chapter that even the small implementation of this dharma brings about, protects you from great fear. As Ramakrishna Paramahansa used to say that if you drink a whole glass of milk every day, you get that much nourishment. What if you get drink half a glass of milk every day? That much nourishment. Quarter glass, that much. If you drink milk, nourishment will come. And therefore, to the extent that we do, to that extent the nourishment comes. That's the idea here. And in course of time, we hope to drink a glass of milk every day. Start with a spoon, but start with one spoon, and then slowly we hope to be able to drink the whole glass of milk. The idea is that these values are very difficult to follow, not easy to follow. In following the values, we have to really restrain all of our natural tendencies of aggression and natural tendencies of demanding and natural tendencies of fear and insecurities, and we have to restrain them to be able to follow the values. But to the extent that we follow, to that extent we subdue those negative tendencies. And to that extent we get success. So success here is subduing the negative tendencies and encouraging and strengthening the positive tendencies. And ultimately, when the negative tendencies are subdued in large measure, when my heart is now ruled by the positive tendencies, then this process of karma yoga has done its job. Then the next step comes. So now, having described the karma yoga, the first stage of growth, Lord Krishna now proceeds to describe the second stage from the next one. That we'll see in the next class. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Vadarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krutau Vande Bhagavanto Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeri Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyoma Vadvyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om